What if I told you that the course of modern history was secretly determined not in parliament buildings or royal courts, but in candlelit underground chambers by men wearing strange symbols and speaking in code? How much of our world has been shaped by handshakes you've never seen and oaths you've never heard? Imagine yourself transported to 18th century London. The flickering candlelight casts long shadows across wood-panelled walls as men in elaborate masks exchange whispers that would never reach the ears of common folk. The air hangs thick with ambition, forbidden knowledge, and perhaps a hint of brimstone. In this shadowy theatre of power, decisions are being made that will ripple through centuries, altering the very fabric of society in ways that history books rarely acknowledge. Throughout history, hidden behind ornate doors and elaborate rituals, secret societies have operated in the shadows, while influencing everything from scientific discovery to politics. But these weren't just any backroom deals or casual gatherings of the elite. These were meticulously structured organizations with their own rules, hierarchies, and sometimes quite literally, handshakes that could open doors otherwise forever closed. You might think secret societies are the stuff of fiction, something invented by novelists and filmmakers to drive plots forward. But the reality is far more fascinating, because unlike their fictitious counterparts, real secret societies didn't need to invent elaborate world domination schemes. Their influence came naturally from who they recruited and the connections they fostered in an era before LinkedIn could do it for them. So let's pull back the veil and examine 4 of history's most influential secret societies: the Hellfire Club, the Freemasons, the Bavarian Illuminati, and the Bohemian Grove. What you'll discover isn't just a series of historical curiosities, but a blueprint of how power and influence have truly operated throughout history. The Hellfire Club, where debauchery meets politics. The year is 1752. While most of England was preoccupied with the introduction of the Gregorian calendar, which caused riots when people thought the government had stolen 11 days of their lives, Sir Francis Dashwood was busy establishing what would become one of history's most notorious secret societies. The Hellfire Club wasn't even the official name. Dashwood called his organisation the Order of the Knights of St. Francis, though this saintly designation was deeply ironic, given what transpired behind closed doors. The club met in various locations, including the caves Dashwood had specially excavated beneath his estate at West Wycombe. These labyrinthine tunnels, known as the Hellfire Caves, stretched a quarter-mile underground and were designed specifically for the club's secretive gatherings. But what exactly happened in these meetings? While much of what we know is shrouded in rumour and exaggeration, historical evidence confirms that Dashwood's club was fundamentally a gathering place for high society rebels, politicians, aristocrats, and artists who thumbed their noses at the religious and social constraints of their era. The membership roster reads like a who's who of 18th century influence. John Montague, the 4th Earl of Sandwich, who would later lend his name to a certain culinary innovation. John Wilkes, the radical journalist and politician. And even, according to some accounts, Benjamin Franklin, during his time as envoy to England. The activities of the Hellfire Club combined intellectual discussion with ritualistic mockery of religion, and, if contemporary accounts are to be believed, a healthy dose of what the 18th century delicately termed libertine behaviour. Members would dress monks' robes while engaging in elaborate parodies of religious ceremonies, drinking from chalices and toasting to deities that certainly weren't the Christian God. But the Hellfire Club was far more than just a playground for aristocratic rebels. Here's where it gets interesting. Despite their reputation for debauchery, these gatherings served as informal political salons where policy was discussed away from prying eyes and ideas could be exchanged freely without fear of public repercussion. Consider the timing. The 1760s and 1770s were a period of enormous political tension between Britain and its American colonies. Benjamin Franklin's alleged attendance at Hellfire Club meetings during his diplomatic missions to England places these gatherings at the very crucible of pre-revolutionary politics. The privacy afforded by the club allowed for frank discussions that would have been impossible in formal diplomatic channels. Similarly, John Wilkes's membership is noteworthy because he would later become one of England's most vocal advocates for parliamentary reform and freedom of the press. The radical ideas that he would later publish may well have been refined during late-night discussions in Dashwood's underground caves. Even the Earl of Sandwich's role shouldn't be underestimated. As First Lord of the Admiralty, he controlled the world's most powerful navy during a critical period of imperial expansion. Decisions affecting global trade routes and colonial policy could have been influenced by conversations had while drinking from chalices adorned with satanic imagery. What makes the Hellfire Club particularly significant is how it demonstrates a key feature of secret societies throughout history. They create spaces where the powerful can speak candidly, away from the constraints of their public positions. The infamous hedonism served a dual purpose, both as entertainment for jaded aristocrats and as a bonding mechanism that ensured mutual secrecy. After all, when everyone present has participated in scandalous behaviour, no one can risk exposure without implicating themselves. By the time the Hellfire Club faded in the 1760s, due in part to ageing membership and changing political circumstances, the blueprint had been established for how secret societies could operate as shadow forums of power and influence. The lesson wasn't lost on those who would form the next generation of secret brotherhoods. The Freemasons, architecture of influence. If the Hellfire Club represented the rebellious side of secret societies, the Freemasons embodied something altogether more structured and enduring. To understand the staggering influence of Freemasonry, consider this. Of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence, at least 9 were confirmed Freemasons. Of the 39 signers of the US Constitution, at least 13 were Masons. And of the first 14 US presidents, at least 8 belonged to the fraternity. But the Freemason story begins long before American independence. While modern Freemasonry, formally organised in 1717 with the establishment of the Grand Lodge of England, its roots stretch back to the medieval stonemasons' guilds, the skilled craftsmen who built Europe's cathedrals and castles. These original masons developed systems of recognition, passwords and handshakes, to prove their level of skill when travelling to new construction sites. This practical system would evolve into the elaborate rituals and degrees of modern Freemasonry. The transition from actual stonemasons to a philosophical organisation occurred gradually throughout the 17th century, as lodges began accepting speculative members, men who weren't actual craftsmen but were interested in the symbolic aspects of building and architecture. By the early 18th century, Freemasonry had evolved into what it effectively remains today, a fraternal organisation using the tools of stonemasons, the square, compass, level, etc., as symbols to teach moral and ethical lessons. What made Freemasonry particularly influential was its structure. Unlike the relatively informal Hellfire Club, Masonic lodges operated with consistent rules and recognised hierarchies. A Mason from London could visit a lodge in Philadelphia and, through the correct signs and passwords, be welcomed as a brother. This created a pre-industrial, global network. At a time when such connections were exceedingly rare, the Masonic network proved especially valuable during the Enlightenment era, when scientific and philosophical ideas were rapidly evolving. Freemasons espoused values of universal brotherhood, religious tolerance, and the pursuit of knowledge. Revolutionary concepts in an age still dominated by religious orthodoxy and hereditary privilege. Their lodges became spaces where men from different social classes could meet on the level, another Masonic symbol, creating unprecedented opportunities for the exchange of ideas across traditional social boundaries. Consider the scientific advancements of the period. The Royal Society, England's premier scientific organisation, overlapped significantly with Masonic membership. According to historian Margaret C. Jacob, at least 80% of the Royal Society's members were Freemasons during certain periods. This connection facilitated the spread of scientific knowledge throughout Europe and eventually to the American colonies. But perhaps the most tangible evidence of Masonic influence comes from the American Revolutionary period. The Boston Tea Party was allegedly organised at the Green Dragon Tavern, which housed St. Andrew's Masonic Lodge. Paul Revere, a prominent Mason, was master of that very lodge. George Washington was initiated as a Mason in 1752 and remained an active member throughout his life, even serving as worshipful master of his lodge, while simultaneously commanding the Continental Army. When Washington laid the cornerstone of the US Capitol in 1793, he did so wearing his Masonic apron and using Masonic ceremonial tools. The architectural symbolism of Washington, D.C., from its perfect right angles to its deliberate incorporation of classical elements, reflects Masonic ideals of order, proportion, and harmony. Yet Freemasonry wasn't without its critics. In 1826, the mysterious disappearance of William Morgan, who had threatened to publish Masonic secrets, sparked America's first third-party political movement, the Anti-Masonic Party, based entirely on opposition to Freemasonry's perceived secretive influence. This backlash demonstrates just how powerful the organization had become in the public imagination. What makes Freemasonry particularly interesting among secret societies is its paradoxical nature. While maintaining secret rituals and recognition signals, it has operated largely in the open, with publicly known meeting places and published membership rolls. This semi-public status allowed it to influence society more directly than fully clandestine organizations, while still maintaining the mystique and selective membership that defined secret societies. The Masonic model, a hierarchical, ritualistic brotherhood with shared values and mutual support, would inspire numerous other organizations, both benign and controversial. But perhaps none would generate more speculation and fear than our next subject: the Bavarian Illuminati, the secret society that wasn't what you think. On May 1st, 1776, in Ingolstadt, Bavaria, now part of Germany, a professor of law named Adam Weishaupt founded a small secret society with 5 initial members. He called it the Order of the Illuminati. Unlike many secret societies that evolved organically over time, the Illuminati was deliberately created with specific philosophical and political goals. Goals that would make it perhaps the most feared secret society in history, despite its remarkably brief existence. Weishaupt, a former Jesuit student who had become disillusioned with the church's conservative outlook, designed the Illuminati to spread Enlightenment ideals, rationalism, secular thought, and republican democracy. These may seem unobjectionable today, but in 18th century Bavaria, a deeply conservative Catholic monarchy, such ideas were revolutionary and dangerous. The original structure of the Illuminati consisted of 3 primary classes, each with several degrees inspired partly by Freemasonry. New members started as novices and could advance through various ranks as they demonstrated their dedication to the order's principles. The highest levels were reserved for those fully committed to Weishaupt's vision of a rational society governed by reason rather than superstition or hereditary privilege. To expand their influence, the Illuminati adopted a controversial strategy, infiltrating existing Masonic lodges. Rather than building a parallel organization from scratch, Weishaupt and his followers joined Masonic lodges and recruited promising members from within. This approach proved remarkably effective. By 1784, just 8 years after its founding, the Illuminati had established a network of about 2,000 members spread across Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and parts of France and Italy. The membership included influential intellectuals, writers, doctors, and even some nobles and government officials. Baron Adolf Knigg, who joined in 1780, was particularly instrumental in the order's expansion, using his extensive Masonic connections to recruit new members. Knigg also helped refine the group's rituals and structure, making it more appealing to potential recruits. What did the Illuminati actually do? Their activities were far less sensational than later conspiracy theories would suggest. Members gathered to discuss philosophy and politics, wrote and circulated texts promoting Enlightenment ideals, and strategically placed sympathetic individuals in positions of cultural and political influence. Their methodology was intellectual and incremental, rather than violent or revolutionary. The Illuminati's actual historical influence is difficult to measure precisely, but their ideas certainly contributed to the intellectual ferment that would eventually lead to significant political changes across Europe. However, their direct organizational impact was curtailed by what happened next. In 1784, Karl Theodor, the Duke of Bavaria, issued an edict banning all secret societies, specifically naming the Illuminati. This was followed by additional edicts in 1785 that explicitly banned the order and threatened severe punishments for membership. Government raids seized internal documents that were published to discredit the group. Weishaupt fled Bavaria, and the organization effectively collapsed by 1787, just 11 years after its founding. Under normal circumstances, this might have been the end of the story, a footnote in European intellectual history. But in 1797, Augustin Baruel in France and John Robertson in Scotland independently published works claiming that the Illuminati had survived its suppression and was the hidden hand behind the French Revolution. Despite lacking credible evidence, these claims gained traction, particularly as Europe's aristocracy searched for explanations for the unprecedented political upheaval of the age. Thus began the Illuminati's second life, not as an actual organization, but as a powerful symbol and scapegoat. Throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, the name Illuminati would be applied to various perceived threats, from communists to bankers to cultural elites. The irony is palpable. An organization founded to combat superstition and promote rational thought became the centerpiece of some of history's most persistent conspiracy theories. The historical Illuminati's legacy demonstrates an important pattern in secret societies. Their influence often outlives their actual existence, particularly when they become symbols that tap into broader social anxieties. The fear of hidden manipulation by unseen forces is a recurring theme in how societies respond to secretive organizations, regardless of those organizations' actual power or activities. The Bohemian Grove, where the powerful play. Deep in the redwood forests of Monte Rio, California, approximately 2,700 acres of pristine woodland have hosted one of America's most exclusive gatherings for over a century. The Bohemian Grove, established in 1878 by members of San Francisco's Bohemian Club, represents a different type of secret society, one that doesn't rely on elaborate degrees or ancient rituals, but instead functions as an ultra-exclusive retreat where America's business and political elite can temporarily escape the constraints of public life. The Bohemian Club itself began as a gathering of journalists, artists, and musicians, actual bohemians in the cultural sense. However, by the early 20th century, its membership had shifted dramatically toward the wealthy and powerful. Today, the club's waiting list is legendarily long, and membership fees run into tens of thousands of dollars. Each July, the club hosts a 2-week encampment at the Grove, where members and their guests engage in what might seem like an elaborate summer camp for the super elite. Attendees stay in rustic cabins or camps with names like Mandalay, Lost Angels, and Owl's Nest, grouped according to social connections and status. The camp's motto, "Weaving spiders come not here," supposedly indicates that business dealings are prohibited, though the reality has proven more complicated. The centerpiece of Bohemian Grove activities is the cremation of care ceremony, performed on the first night of the encampment. This theatrical production features robed figures, a booming voice, and the ritual burning of an effigy representing care or worldly concerns before a 40-foot concrete owl. While this ceremony has fueled countless conspiracy theories, historians and journalists who have studied it describe it as essentially elaborate amateur theatre, more fraternity pageantry than a cult ritual. What makes the Bohemian Grove significant isn't its ceremonies but its attendees. The membership list has included every Republican president since Calvin Coolidge, countless cabinet officials, military leaders, bank executives, media moguls, and corporate directors. During the Grove's heyday in the mid-20th century, it functioned as an informal summit of American power. The most historically significant moment in the Grove's history likely came in September 1942, when a discussion between Grove members Ernest Lawrence, James Conant, and military officials led to the establishment of what would become the Manhattan Project. The secluded, trusting environment of the Grove provided the ideal setting for preliminary conversations about what would be history's most classified scientific undertaking. Journalist and Bohemian Grove researcher William Domhoff described the encampment's function perfectly. It's not where the elite meet to secretly determine the exact course of world events, but it is where the elite meet to reinforce shared values and social connections. This reinforcement of social connections is the Grove's true purpose and power. When corporate executives, government officials, and cultural leaders spend 2 weeks in an atmosphere of relaxed camaraderie, the informal bonds formed can translate into tangible advantages later. A cabinet secretary might be more inclined to return a phone call from someone he roasted marshmallows with at the Grove. A CEO might feel more comfortable discussing a potential merger with someone who participated in the same lakeside theatrical production. Unlike older secret societies with elaborate ideological frameworks, the Bohemian Grove operates on a simpler principle. Exclusive access creates valuable social capital. In this sense, it represents the evolution of secret societies into the modern era, less focused on esoteric knowledge or revolutionary ideals, more centered on the practical benefits of elite networking in an increasingly complex world. The Grove also demonstrates how modern secret societies maintain their influence in an age of mass media and increased transparency. Despite periodic journalistic exposés, most notably by Spy magazine in 1989 and Vanity Fair in 2009, and even an unauthorized video recording by activist Alex Jones in 2000, the Grove continues its annual gatherings, largely unchanged. In an era when privacy seems increasingly scarce, the ability to create and maintain such an exclusive space represents a form of power in itself. The web of whispers, beyond the veil. The rabbit hole of secret societies extends far deeper than our four primary examples. Consider the enigmatic Skull and Bones, established at Yale University in 1832 inside a windowless building they called the Tomb. With just 15 new members selected annually, this society has produced 3 US presidents: William Howard Taft, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush, countless Supreme Court justices, CIA directors, and financial titans. Their initiation rituals reportedly include lying in coffins, mock killings, and confessions of personal secrets while surrounded by human skeletal remains. One particularly strange fact: in 1918, Prescott Bush, father and grandfather to presidents, allegedly led a raid to steal Apache leader Geronimo's skull from its grave, a claim taken seriously enough that Geronimo's descendants filed a lawsuit against the society in 2009. Or what about the Order of the Nine Angles? This much darker organisation emerged in Britain during the 1960s, blending elements of Nazism, Satanism, and ancient pagan traditions. Unlike most societies we've discussed, the ONA openly embraces its sinister reputation, advocating what they call practical sinistercation, essentially the deliberate breaking of societal taboos. Their texts describe 7 earthly gates members must pass through, including stages requiring extended isolation in wilderness areas and what they euphemistically term culling. British authorities have linked the group to multiple terrorist plots in recent years. For something completely different, consider Japan's centuries-old Yakuza organizations. While technically organized crime syndicates, they operate with many hallmarks of traditional secret societies: elaborate initiation ceremonies, coded language systems, and symbolic tattoos that cover members' entire bodies. Remarkably, until very recently, the Yakuza maintained offices with listed phone numbers and published magazines, existing in a strange twilight between secrecy and public acknowledgement unique among such organizations. The 1700s also gave us the curious case of the Asiatic Brethren, founded in Vienna by Hans Heinrich von Ecker und Eckhoffen. This society attempted the unusual feat of blending Kabbalistic Jewish mysticism with Christian Rosicrucianism, a remarkable endeavour in an era of entrenched religious divisions. Their rituals incorporated Hebrew letters and Jewish mystical concepts while maintaining a formally Christian framework. Particularly notable was their progressive stance on admitting Jewish members when most other societies explicitly excluded them. Coded communications, speaking without words. The mechanics of secrecy themselves deserve closer examination. Secret societies developed elaborate systems to identify fellow members and transmit information securely. Masonic handshakes remain perhaps the most famous example. Complex sequences of pressure points and finger positions that instantly identify not just membership, but specific rank. The Carbonari of 19th century Italy, who fought for liberation from Austrian rule, employed a fascinating verification system. Upon meeting a suspected fellow member, one would casually mention feeling cold. The proper response was to say one felt wet, completing the reference to charcoal, carbone in Italian, which is both cold and wet when extinguished. The Rosicrucians developed an ingenious method for public communication, publishing their manifestos as fiction and using symbolically dense illustrations that conveyed additional meaning to initiates. Their infamous chemical wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz appeared outwardly as a strange allegorical tale, but contained a complete alchemical formula for those who understood its symbolism. Even architectural features served as communication tools. The compass and square configuration of Masonic buildings, visible from above, allowed travelling members to identify friendly lodges. The Odd Fellows, a society similar to Freemasons, incorporated specific door hinge configurations into their meeting halls. 3 hinges on primary entrances symbolising friendship, love and truth, their central tenets. The technology of secrecy, tools of the hidden trade. The practical mechanisms used to maintain secrecy throughout history reveal remarkable ingenuity. The Bavarian Illuminati pioneered the cell structure later adopted by modern intelligence agencies. Members knew only those in their immediate group and a single contact from the level above, ensuring that captured members could expose only a limited portion of the organisation. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn a magical society of the 1890s that included luminaries like W.B. Yeats and Aleister Crowley, employed enchanted flying rolls, instructional texts written on parchment scrolls that members were forbidden to copy. Instead, initiates would travel to central locations to read these documents under supervision, preventing their teachings from spreading beyond the order. For securing their meeting spaces, the Knights Templar developed an early surveillance system using a series of watchers positioned in concentric rings around their preceptories. Each watcher had view of only those immediately adjacent, creating a secure perimeter that could silently signal approaching visitors through a sequence of subtle hand movements, visible only to the next observer in the chain. The Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor, active in the late 1800s, perfected a method of invisible ink communication, using milk as the medium and heat to reveal the hidden text. More impressively, they developed a form of steganography, where secret messages were encoded in the spacing between words in seemingly innocent correspondence, detectable only by overlaying a specific template provided to members. The persistence of secret societies throughout history, from ancient mystery cults to modern exclusive clubs, suggests something fundamental about human organizational behavior. While their public-facing justifications range from philosophical advancement to business networking, their methods remain remarkably consistent across centuries and continents. The Bilderberg Group, established in 1954, follows this pattern perfectly. This annual invitation-only conference brings together roughly 130 political leaders, experts, and industry titans for closed-door discussions under the Chatham House rule. Participants can use information received but cannot reveal the identity or affiliation of speakers. While the Bilderberg Group publishes its attendee list, the specific conversations remain private, creating the same combination of known membership but secret deliberations that characterized older societies. The Bullingdon Club at Oxford University demonstrates how even primarily social organizations adopt the trappings of secret societies when exclusivity is paramount. This dining club for wealthy undergraduates has included future Prime Ministers David Cameron and Boris Johnson among its members. Their distinctive tradition of destroying restaurant interiors during dinners and then silently handing the proprietor a check to cover damages serves the same bonding function as more elaborate rituals in other societies, creating shared experiences that can't be openly discussed. The centuries-old Alchemists Guild in Prague maintained laboratories beneath the medieval streets where members worked to transform base metals into gold. While their chemical pursuits proved ultimately futile, the knowledge sharing within their hidden workshops laid groundwork for modern chemistry. Their secure underground chambers still exist today, accessible through a specific wine cellar whose entrance is disguised as an ordinary storage rack. Even in our era of supposed transparency, the structural patterns established by historical secret societies persist. Consider Cicada 3301, an anonymous organization that from 2012 to 2014 posted intricate puzzles online involving steganography, cryptography, and obscure literary references to recruit individuals with exceptional code-breaking skills. The purpose of Cicada 3301 remains unknown, though successful solvers reported being contacted for unspecified projects involving privacy technology. The Bohemian Grove continues its annual gatherings, where attendees perform the cremation of care ritual before a 40-foot concrete owl statue. A lesser-known fact, the owl's internal sound system once included a voice provided by Walter Cronkite, one of America's most trusted news anchors, lending his distinctive baritone to proceedings hidden from public view. In mountainous Svalbard, Norway, beyond the Arctic Circle, stands a facility known as the Doomsday Vault, officially the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. This repository holds millions of seed samples from around the world, ostensibly as insurance against global catastrophe. Less discussed are the quarterly gatherings held in its conference facility, where representatives from global agricultural corporations and government agencies meet without public agendas. Perhaps most fascinatingly, modern monarchies maintain their own secret societies. The Royal Victorian Order, personally controlled by the British monarch rather than the government, operates as a chivalric society whose inner workings remain largely private despite its public membership lists. The Swedish royal court maintains the Order of Charles XIII, limited to just 33 members, all high-degree Freemasons personally selected by the king. These modern manifestations demonstrate that despite centuries of exposure, investigation, and occasional legal prohibition. The fundamental pattern established by organizations like the Hellfire Club, the Freemasons, the Illuminati, and countless others continues to replicate throughout society. The names and specific practices evolve, but the underlying architecture remains remarkably consistent. Hidden rooms, selective membership, graduated access to information, and the careful cultivation of influence beyond public scrutiny. As you walk the streets of any major city, passing buildings whose cornerstones bear compasses and squares, or read news of economic forums in remote Swiss locations, you're observing the visible edges of something ancient and persistent, a parallel structure of human organization that has operated alongside conventional institutions throughout recorded history, not as the all-powerful puppet masters of conspiracy fantasy, but as a consistent adaptive feature of how humans create, protect, and transmit certain forms of power and knowledge. The secret societies that influenced everything didn't need to control the world. They simply created the spaces where those who did would meet, talk, and connect, away from the public eye, but woven inextricably into the fabric of history. Thanks for watching.